So I'm Alex. I'm the co-founder and CEO of rTribe, which is a smartphone platform that allows anybody who's struggling with anything, if they're crying out for help, to be heard, whether it's through a peer group or whether through its a ministry or whether from a counselor even. So we're really trying to lower the barriers to people getting help by making counseling especially affordable, anonymous, accessible, always available on your phone. And the other thing we do with all of that data actually is for churches, for nonprofits, and even in corrections is we can share that metadata so that leaders can understand the wellness of their people and therefore make better decisions or put more effort to certain issues. So that's the really exciting part for us right now that we're working on. One of the interesting stats is the floor space has grown for folks in the U.S., but the number of friends and close relationships has decreased at the same time. So loneliness is on the rise, and this great book on loneliness says that when we're disconnected from others, we can't self-regulate. And so we start to use things to regulate: pornography, food, shopping, all of that. And so I think really at the heart of it is it's a loneliness issue and it's a disconnection. And I think we'll spend, if we do get help, an hour support group or something, or an hour in counseling per week, we'll spend 42 times more in front of our phone. And usually it's not in the support group that the problems happen, right? When you're going to act out or struggle, it's when you're away from your support group. So rTribe really came from the perspective of how do we leverage offline community when you're away from it. And so that's kind of the angle that we've taken, is really to connect people to support whenever they need it. One of my favorite stories, when we first started, there were some folks who had met on rTribe online, and one of our friends was in a cafe hearing these guys talk about their struggles. And as he was listening, he was like, man, these guys would be really helped if they had something like rTribe to connect to. And lo and behold, he took the courage to say, hey, I was eavesdropping on your conversation, and do you guys, have you heard of rTribe? And they're like, that's why we're here. Like, they met anonymously because they were struggling with issues they didn't feel safe to share in their context. And so for them to be able to meet anonymously, build trust, and then take that into meeting together really allowed them to further their healing journey. So that's one of my favorite stories of rTribe. It really comes out of my story. Grandparents, Holocaust, trauma, addiction, on both sides of my family. And that came into my life. Lost my dad to those sorts of issues when I was 8. I carried those issues forward, obviously, from that into all sorts of craziness in my life. I was a drug dealer in college. I was, into sex, and just coping in all sorts of crazy ways. And I came to faith, actually, in college. And the problem I experienced, though, was that while I did have a pretty awesome conversion moment, I think there was not an understanding of the difference between a spiritual issue and a disease. And I know that people don't like to use disease to think about these things because it feels like it's pathologizing. But in some ways, understanding the powerlessness that comes from being affected by PTSD and addiction and all these sorts of things allows you to surrender, right, to a process that will heal you. So I was struggling with trauma, some addictive tendencies, and I was trying to apply spiritual disciplines to those issues. And what happens when you try to apply spiritual disciplines to mental health issues is they often don't work. And the problem from that is then you have two conclusions: either my faith is worthless, or God is worthless. And either of those cut you off, right, from yourself and from God, who actually wants to heal you. And so I carry that confusion with me all through ministry, not really understanding that I had PTSD, I had anxiety, and I was out of that trying to cope in unhealthy ways. And so I went into counseling, and in counseling I was like, oh, there is a difference between a spiritual discipline approach and a kind of mental health approach. And so, got better, got some healing through counseling, and then realized in my practice that the way that we were trying to help people was, in the kind of mental health realm is pretty far behind the digital age. So I was trying to help teens, especially with pornography. It was like bringing a knife to a gunfight, like the whole workbook and meeting once a week. It was, when they had their struggle in their hand always. So it was in kind of that context, and also with my friend and co-founder, Josh, that we started to try to figure out how do we solve that problem? How do we leverage all this awesome connection and community that's happening offline? There was a mentor there who we call Gandalf, because we'd never done startups or business or anything like that, and he was kind of like young hobbits. Here's how you throw the ring in Mordor. This is how you tackle this giant, and and it's been an incredible, unforeseen journey. We've had a couple 100,000 people use the platform, like thousands of reviews of stories of people getting help and helping others. It's been an incredible ride. We're really a connector, so we allow people who are kind of heroes in a sense or inspirers to use rTribe for their purpose. For example, there's a 12-step group in Texas that I love because they love to go onto rTribe and just find people who downloaded it randomly and have a mentoring relationship with them. And so I'll send people to this 12-step group, and we'll hear back that same week they had an hour conversation with a sponsor, and it changed their life. And so I think in terms of inspiring others, like that's what we love. We love hearing stories of how people are just using rTribe as a way to further their story by helping others.